Welcome to the Rebuilt Man podcast. I am your host, Coach Frank Rich. And guys, we have an incredible conversation on deck for you today. I'm joined by an incredible gentleman, a friend, a colleague in the space, somebody that is doing tremendous transformational work, helping guys find freedom. Welcome to our Coach's Corner series. These shows are dedicated at shining a light and highlighting individuals in the porn addiction recovery space. And joining me on today's show is Joe Masek, founder of the Freedom Group and co-host of the Manual podcast. With the Freedom Group, he and his team lead men out of pornography addiction into living a craving-free lifestyle with a blended, holistic approach, bringing neuroscience, psychology, and faith to the table to help guys that are struggling in the depths of addiction find freedom, create a craving-free lifestyle so they can walk in freedom and walk in purity. Joe, welcome to the show today.
Awesome to be here, man. Calling from different sides of the United States, Minnesota to Florida. I wish I was down there hanging out with you in person right now. I got to tell you that much.
Yeah, brother. Well, we're about to get bombarded here next week with that cold front, which is probably typical summer day, but we'll get a little chilly here when it gets down into the 40s. But yeah, it's nice and coolish outside. I think we're in the 70s, but we're both indoors here recording, and like you said, across the country, but this show will reach across the world. So that's what's so amazing about some of these platforms is the impact that you can have. So Joe, I want to go ahead and dive in, man, and kind of talk about the work that you and your team are doing over there and how you guys are leading men out of the depths of addiction. And, it's interesting because neither one of us, and, we've done 4 or 5 of these episodes featuring other colleagues in the space. Nobody, when growing up, when they were asked what they wanted to do for a living, probably put down, I want to be a porn addiction recovery coach. But if we go back in time, Joe, what was it that inspired you to start working with and start coaching men that were struggling with porn addiction?
Yeah, love it. I mean, it's funny that you say that because I think back to the earliest memories in my own story. I grew up in a pretty active Christian family and what was going on weekend retreats all the time. And it wasn't too infrequently that in the context of those retreats and then in an average week where presented an opportunity to pray, to talk to God, there was pretty much only one thing that I wanted out of my individual life, right? It was my number one pain point and problem. I wanted the sexual issues I experienced resolved, and they just seemed to stick. I could have a retreat high that would last a week and then find myself back in the regular cycle of using. And ultimately, so much of that really tainted and colored my experience of upbringing. Otherwise, in a pretty good, stable foundation in terms of my life, not growing up in poverty or anything crazy or dramatic. The reality was I was exposed to porn when I was 7. And then I had an older peer start to act out sexually with me and experiment with me when I was 7, 8 years old. And really, from that time forward, porn became everything that I needed to cope. I had regular access to it or could find access to it. And without really knowing it, it became my primary agent for regulating my own nervous system. Now, they say, other common denominators that I relate to that they say sort of like acting as the 3 predominant common denominators for guys who experience sexual addiction in various forms: having emotionally distant parents, being bullied by peers, and growing up in a performance-driven faith or community context. That all those 3 things were true of me to a certain extent, which certainly contributed to it. But that early introduction, the unbridled access, and then the deep identity issues that I started to develop as a result of a duality of personhood, if you will, sort of like who I'm trying to maintain external, who I am, and trying to find myself out here, and then what's happening in the darkness of my own life. And that reality played out, sort of peaked in high school, where I was using pretty much daily, even multiple times a day, where it was kind of like torrential rainfall in terms of out of controlness in my life. I was acting out sexually outside of porn and masturbation as often as I could, if you will. Not in with prostitutes or anything, but romantic partners, people that I dated, et cetera, that I was actively trying to figure out how to fill that hole in me and sort all of that out through the lens of sexuality. Moved into college, started to try to work it out, started to reinvest in my faith after falling away briefly. Had a really powerful, potent experience of being connected to brothers who were open and honest for the first time in my life, who were in a room together, physical room, who shared their entire stories and shared mine, and kind of had the exposure therapy of, holy cow, all this stuff I had held in, I'm now being asked to bring out. Shared about 60% of my story at that point, both what I could recall and then some things that I didn't feel was safe. No, it would have been if I was willing to share it, but went about 60% of the way, but walked out of that room feeling like a 10,000 pound gorilla was off my back. And then tried to start living free. The problem was that after 3 months of freedom, not using porn or masturbation, all of a sudden I found myself going back 1 to 2 weeks of hitting a wall and falling back into it. My background's in educational backgrounds in neuroscience. Always had an interest in the way that the physical wiring of the brain, the neurochemical makeup of the brain plays out in our behavior. First and foremost, like every psychologist or anybody that studies humanity, I think, is first and foremost trying to sort out my stuff first, and then how does it apply to the world around me, which was certainly the case for me. So took a keen interest in that. And I mean, for 12 years, reading, studying, learning through different career paths that I took in between the time I graduated, the time I started the Freedom Group, trying to figure out how to sort out my own story and experience, deployed the particular approach we use in the Freedom Group. And it was the first time that I really started to be able to cognitively experience freedom, be able to start to experience the world in color, reality being pleasurable again in a way that I had not experienced pretty much for the entirety of my life, starting to have a sort of sense of vitality, starting to be able to hit core emotional triggers that would have totally destroyed me and sent me into craving and acting out within, 10 minutes likely, but if not a day, within a day, being able to ride the wave of those things and come it to a resolution. And that's when I started to really learn at a professionally and experientially deep level that porn had become the solution to my problems, not my primary problem. And that it had been for the vast majority of the developmental stages of my childhood into young adulthood, into adulthood, my primary coping mechanism and self-regulation, emotional regulation tool. And I love Charles Duhigg, who's a psychologist, has a great quote that the golden rule of behavior change is that you can't kill or extinguish a behavior. You can only change it. And this is something I love about your process for sure. Is like we have to actually do something else. We have to put new systems, new tools, new things in the place. It's not just about restricting access. It's not just limiting capacity. It's not just trying to put myself in, sort of a external prison cell because I'm no longer trustworthy, which I think is what a lot of us try to do as we try to integrate a freedom practice in our life. But the reality is we go to porn and masturbation because it works, because it alleviates the physiological and the neurological discomfort that's created in our brains. But you're not a victim and you're not stuck there. You can actually rewire your brain if you learn to deploy new habits and processes in your life to be able to do that. So I started to do that and it started to work fairly quickly. And then as I started to study more in the neuroscience literature and psychological literature, it's like, holy cow, there's actually proofs for this stuff. They've done this with other types of craving and other types of addiction, and this actually works. And so then I'm sort of a natural marketer in the communities I live in. So I started telling other people about my experience, and other buddies of mine are like, hey, can you help me with that? And so really the process of coaching at the beginning was very much a natural overflow of like, yeah, I'd love to share my experience. And it started to work for other guys. And then they're telling their buddies, and other guys are asking me, and guys are reaching out to me through Instagram or LinkedIn. And it's at that point, it's not an influx, it's just a trickle, but I'm responding to it. And it got to the point where I was like, hey, there's something here that's synergistic with what I studied, my educational background, certainly my story. Ed Milet says you're best equipped to serve the person you used to be. Like that's the foundation of it for me, is like, I know what it feels like to be stuck with no hope of getting out, and then go through a process that something clicks and a switch flips. And it's like, holy cow, like that's an addiction in its own right. And I want to turn around and give it away, which is then the last thing I'll say about it is like, part of this is for my own healing in integration. I certainly will admit to that because the sort of the godfathers or grandfathers of the whole sexual addiction movement have written in their literature that there's something to when we come out of the cave, if you will, turning around and going back in to invite others out, that does something deep in us to be able to ground and fortify and strengthen the work. And so I think at the beginning too, certainly that process was like giving it away became a natural overflow of what I'd experienced. It was also significantly beneficial to aiding me in deepening and strengthening, practicing the tools along with others. And then as we built this community, and finding ourselves in different places. I'm teaching a class at a seminary up here in the Twin Cities, and bringing guys through a freedom group there. And we work with different groups of people in person, online. That's been all of that. The experience has been it's just an opportunity to practice again and again and refine and get better and better. So we've been doing group coaching for 2 years now. Our team of 5 guys works with a little over 100 guys right now through a year-long process. And we really found that like guys working together in the context of a community, a small enough community where they can be open and honest and vulnerable, but a large enough group of guys where they're not dependent on 1 or 2 guys for their lifeline, where them working together through a defined approach that unfolds over a period of time is really helpful. I mean, some of the best, when I went to counseling earlier in my life, whether it be marriage counseling, my wife and I, or me individually, like 20 weeks or like some context of framework of time, like this is my problem, this is where I'm aiming to go, has just worked out really well. I've seen for men. And so we wanted to be able to do that while also honoring the fact that what neuroscience literature supports, like we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver in our approach and getting guys to the finish line, to actually get them there and then let them go if they get there faster than other guys might. So we found that a year, we tell guys 3 to 12 months is the time frame if you practice these skills and tools and you actually are serious about it in your life. If you get after it from day one, that somewhere within that time frame, you can actually experience the cognitive rewiring of your neurological centers of your brain that need to be in order to be able to see the world as God intended it to be and walk in freedom. And like I said, it's been an addiction in its own right to be able to participate in it and be in the life. And I have experiences multiple times a week at this point, being able to coach guys where I lean back in my chair and kind of have one of those this is what I was created to do moments, which is has shifted from just a primary pain point that I used to pray to try to ask God to take away from me to a dream outcome for me. Is that everything I experience, and I see this all the time with guys I work with. They at first they just want it gone, and then once it's gone, they're grateful that they experienced that because they realize what it fortified and strengthened them in. And to have not had that experience wouldn't have forced them to look at their life in the way they had to in order to get free. So, which is certainly I think the process with any pain that we're allowed to go through.
Well, I think that's that detachment from that old identity, right? Once you're free of that old self, you're able to reflect and look back and realize like you would only be where you are today by having had gone through the pain and adversity. It's hard to have that level of self-reflection when you're still strapped in, you're still holding on. So I think that's a massive sign to a guy that, hey, he is on the other side, or he's close to being craving free, or what we would say being a rebuilt man and walking in a new identity, is your ability to self-reflect, look back, and be grateful for what you've gone through. So I think that's a massive piece of awareness there. You said so much, man, that resonated with me. And, you talked about the colorfulness of life coming back and the experiences of being able to enjoy the moments of peace, of joy, of prosperity in life, not feeling like there's this darkness, that you see the world through. And that was a big thing for me early on. And that's what led me to start talking about it. But I didn't know at the time, when I started to open up and share the story and even helping men, the work it was going to continue to do on me. And I think that's one of the greatest things of transformational work, is obviously seeing other people's lives grow and evolve and having impact, and being able to sit back in a chair and kind of like be grateful for what you're doing in other people's lives, but also what it forces you to do and continue doing yourself. What, Joe, has this work taught you about Joe?
Yeah. How freaking anxious I was most of my life. How much anxiety and overwhelm has played a role in my story and experience, and how I never dealt with it in the way that needed to be dealt with in order to not just not go to porn as a solution, but to show up to my family. I got a wife and 4 little kids at home from 9 to newborn. We've gone through some crazy stuff in the past couple of years to be able to show up and be present to every moment of life and take from it everything it has to give me. And I've experienced that in every domain of my life, in my relationships, in my family, in my friendships, in community life as people navigate hard things and being able to be present and support them in my work. I mean, the first place I saw that really in an animated way, I started my first LLC when I was in 8th grade. I was a DJ from 8th grade till like 5 years after I graduated. And I've had some pretty awesome opportunities DJing for Red Bull, DJing for events of 5, 10, 15,000 people, like been able to experience some pretty cool highs. But every experience in entrepreneurship was riddled with overwhelm and anxiety and debilitated my capacity to be able to stay in the hard. I love Samuel Chan's book, Leadership Pain. If you want to elevate as a leader, elevate your capacity to handle pain, right? And ultimately, this inclination to act out and use was masking my ability to be able to meet pain and discomfort in the moment and say, I'm not threatened by you, that this is an opportunity to increase my threshold. And I missed all those opportunities. So in some ways, I want to say going back in a negative way, but really starting to, as porn became less and less a part of my life, go through more and more hard things and stay in it and move through it, right? The only way is through. Pain is path, discomfort is your teacher, really are mantras and mottos for us in our community, in our groups, because that's the reality. I mean, it's Jordan Peterson, pick up your damn cross, right? Choose your damn suffering. Like, that's the invitation. And it isn't just a life of suffering, but in sort of a drab or terrible way, but that's like, that's a part of life. A part of stepping into an integrated manhood is a willingness to submit yourself to the suffering that life requires. And I'm not going to hide from it, and I'm not going to avoid it. I'm going to engage it. And nothing showed that more true than when my son, my 5-year-old at the time son, was diagnosed with cancer. Had a brain tumor a year ago, and so we spent the past year, October 10th was the 1-year anniversary when he was diagnosed. He went in for emergency surgery the next day, 15-hour brain surgery. 1 week later, 15-hour brain surgery. 6 weeks living apart from my family. At the beginning of 2025, radiation in a different city within Minnesota to be able to get him a less damaging form of radiation. Every day holding my son as he freaks out and screams to be sedated, to go in there and being able to do what I think the Father was doing for Jesus on the cross when he said, I think he held him and embraced him when Jesus said, take this cup from me. And he said, I can't, I can't do this for you, but I can hold you and I can love you through it. That I felt like I saw the image of our Father and the way that he loves us and attunes to us through the process of suffering. But so much of my life as a young person, I escaped all of that. I tried to circumvent all of it. And I created more suffering and pain for myself by avoiding it. But being in that experience this past year amplified and like revealed for me like how good life can be, even in the shittiest situation, if I'm willing to submit to the process, face the storm, and say, I want this. Versus my disposition. You talk so much about mindset. We talk about reframing so much in our system and process. How do you engage your thinking brain in being able to get the rest of your nervous system to calm down? What you tell yourself matters, right? So often I faced pain as I want this to end. And I've learned over the course of time to rewire that to a reflexive, I want this. And when that mental shift happens, my capacity to be able to see life and gift and joy and actually like find fulfillment in even the most difficult situations shifts from what otherwise could be excruciating hell to actually there's beauty in this moment of tension and suffering. And so again, I use that framework for the past year is like where I think it was deepened in me of like, this freaking matters. And it's not just about getting porn out of my life. Like, I needed to be here for my family and for my son. I'm really glad I dealt with this 5 years ago so that I can be in it with him now. And sort of like, so that strengthened and deepened in me. And then there's these other smaller moments, which I pointed to before I brought him up, of recognizing like in work life, like, when I first started my first group, three friends of mine in my own network. So I had 7 guys that were strangers and 3 friends that were going to be in that first group, and the 3 buddies backed out last minute. I felt super rejected by that. And I remember, and they all within like the 2-hour period were like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do it. After I sent out our initial, like, hey guys, we're going to get launched. We're going to get started. Like, hey, I'm out. And I just remember that feeling washing over me, like wanting to run, wanting to hide. It's like heaviness on my shoulders, bowling ball in my gut. Like, I want to hide. And normally that would have driven me straight to my computer, because that would have been the reset that I needed. But I remember standing up and taking a couple deep breaths and resetting my nervous system, and allowing myself to calm down a little bit. And I remember pacing back and forth in my kitchen and living room, and starting to talk to God. Like, God, I believe you invited me to do this. Like, I believe that you're in this. And if you want to kill it, go ahead, kill it. But I think there's something here for me, and I want to stay in it. I don't want to escape it. Right. And so for me, that the first step was the practicing presence, learning to calm down and use the breath to be able to regulate an overwhelmed mind that was starting to become activated as a practical tool. And then reframing, starting to be able to tell myself what was actually true, that I don't want to run from this. I'm okay with rejection. They're not rejecting me. It's okay that they said no. Like sorting out all these things that outside the context of being triggered is practical and normal. And that for me walked me into, again, like tools that have become a part of who I am. And that's what we help guys do, is make it a part of who they are, learning to integrate this into their life. So when they notice themselves becoming triggered in one form or another, emotionally reactive, going to places, that they know how to self-regulate, again, because you can't just extinguish a bad habit. You need new habits in their place.
Running a successful online business, coaching platform, groups, all the different things that you're doing, it requires a multitude of skill sets. It's interesting that you say, you've kind of been entrepreneur, through and through since young childhood, starting the DJ business. And, I know you've had other ventures throughout your life, but you also have this educational background in psychology, and you've been able to blend those two unique skill sets and create a thriving business community where you're employing multiple staff, but you're also leading a group of men. Knowing what you knew about psychology and neuroscience obviously set you up to have an understanding of this space contextually, right, from an education kind of standpoint. But getting into the work, you probably learned some different things that maybe schooling and education doesn't prepare you for. What is the one thing maybe you wish you knew about specifically this recovery coaching space before you took the plunge and dove in?
Yeah. The thing I've learned more and more about over time is uh, every single guy has resistance that will kill him in the first phase of the process unless somebody calls it out in him. And so for very often, I think at the beginning of my coaching and building a team, it was like, well, let's let him see that for himself. Like, get curious enough, but like, oh, I notice he's not showing up to group anymore. Or he's not weighing in the way that we're telling him to. That he's and okay, well, I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure there's an answer. And what I've found is that as I've started early on in the process to lean in and be like, do you see that? I want to know, what is that? Why are you doing that? And maybe it is just environmental life in that space and time, but almost, I want to say 95% of the time, it's self-protection. It's safety mechanism that I don't want to go there. I don't want to do this stuff. I don't, we give guys a sleep plan, a nutrition plan, fitness plan. They watch a video that comes out every week that sort of walks them into our process and a new tool or skill that's part of the coursework that they do, or reflection exercise, and then 3 small daily habits that they integrate on a daily basis. And those 3 are really hard for guys to apply at the beginning of time. And for me, I used to just let it go. And now over the course of time, it's like those become the barometer to lean in. Like, why are you so resistive to doing that? Is it just because I'm telling you to do that and you don't do what other people tell you? Or is there something deeper going on in you that's resistive, adding in new habits and trying new things in your life, which ends up revealing for a guy things he was previously subconsciously aware of? So I think that's a framework or a principle that I found is the guys actually appreciate, I don't want to say called out, because that seems that the guys appreciate to have the lights turn on to their experience. Like if you see something in me that you see as clear as day and I keep doing it, it's probably because I don't see it clear as day. Right. And so part of the benefit that I found that I don't think anybody really taught me, because I think there's, in psychology, my wife's a mental health practitioner, that I think we can be pretty passive in terms, or trained to be passive in asking open-ended questions, and never going, what is that? Tell me more about that. Why are you doing that consistently? That I found remarkably beneficial to a guy being able to make progress that he previously may have stayed stuck in for months, if I had just been willing to go there with him.
Yeah, I was asked one time my style of coaching, if I would label myself as like, a soft, not pat on the back type of coach, but somebody that, creates a soft space when needed, or if I'm your more hard charging call out type of coach. And yeah, I think I've done this long enough, and I think coaching is a skill set that I've acquired over a lifetime of various work endeavors, leadership development, sales training. I've ran large sales teams, I've ran large virtual teams, and I've obviously been deep entrusted or entrusted in athletics my entire life as well. So coaching is, I think, kind of like entrepreneurship, is kind of at my core as well. And I said, well, it depends on what the situation and environment is calling for. I would believe that I can create both of those. I can create a soft space where a guy can feel that he can get vulnerable and share. But in those times, like you said, it's like some guy needs that calling out of his own BS. He needs you to be the mirror for him because he can't see it, like you said. And it's interesting that you said all guys experience some level of resistance in the beginning. And once they get on the other side of the resistance, it's just the continuation of the work, I think, and then freedom will be inevitable. I'm curious if you've seen, though, consistent patterns in that resistance. I talk a lot about mindset because I think one of the things that holds most guys back is the mindset or the belief systems that they hold around themselves, especially a guy that has been struggling for years, decades. He's tried and failed time and time and time again, that oftentimes it's his inability to truly believe that freedom is possible. It's like this limiting belief of, I'll never get free. That's the resistance that I've seen as one of the biggest ones. But I'm curious, in the work and all the guys that you've worked with, have you seen a consistent pattern or biggest barrier that holds most men back?
Yeah, this is another great question. I mean, certainly in mindset and framing, hope and hopelessness play a massive role in keeping a guy stuck, right? What hopelessness does is it provides all kinds of feedback from my thinking brain to my emotional brain, which has been hijacked by porn and masturbation, that this is a threat. And maybe even an existential threat, to your point, of where I always live in fear of it creeping around the next corner. And I start to live my life at best trying to evade craving, evade the desire, sexual arousal and desire at every point, and I'm on high alert. Well, the problem with that approach is that the fight or flight center of your brain is the part of your brain that's been hijacked. The part of our brain that's designed to keep us safe and become highly reactive in order to keep us safe has been hijacked. And because we've learned over the time that this is the best way to safety. This is the fastest, most immediate way out. And so just react and shut off your thinking brain. Well, when you walk around with that sort of hopeless mindset, you reinforce, yes, don't think, don't think about it. Just emotionally react next time it comes. I think that's what it sets up guys to experience. The other part, because guys, I think, have a certain sense of, and this could be, I mean, I think a lot of times it's attributed to like American culture, individualism, like I have to figure it out on my own, self-made man, etc. Like the avoidance of really dealing with it. I mean, for almost 10 years, I would have told you, yeah, I'm dealing with it. But if you asked me to get really practical, so like, what are you doing? Like the last time you fell, what did you try differently? What? I mean, the answer would have been nothing, right? And the vast majority of those 10 years, the answer would have been nothing. Even the whole time I felt like, and I would have told you if you met me at a men's conference or like out on the street and be like, yeah, like we started talking about this, I would have been like, yeah, I'm really trying. I probably would have come up with stuff. And the reality is like, I really wasn't. My patterns were still the same. My ritual was still the same. My behavior was still the same. My mindsets were still the same. The way I saw myself, the way I related to other people was still the same. So that stuff needed to be brought into awareness. And I needed to stop avoiding the truth, which is my favorite definition of confession. What does it mean to confess your sin? It means to tell the truth about the things that you do that harm you or others, right? Just start telling the truth. And for me, that was the first process that coaching and being seen by others was so massively beneficial for. Was I started to actually have to tell the truth. And along with my lifelong porn addiction was a lifelong minimization and lying habit, right? Is to try to be performative, to look better in the eyes of others, even though that progressively meant I looked bad in my own eyes, right? I felt worse about who I am because this dichotomy became more extreme as I went through life. And beginning to tell the truth is this refreshing experience of like, this is just where I'm at, and that this is my starting point, and I grow from here, which allows you to be able to have, again, a new kind of freshness and freedom to just be able to do that. And then the other thing, just to go back to what you were saying about that, the ability to be able to do both in the context of coaching is, I think men need challenge and attunement. And very often they've never had a masculine relationship in their life that afforded them both, right? Many men grew up with fathers that challenged them in one form or another, but they never experienced emotional closeness or co-regulation, if you will, to use a psychological term, with their dad. They could count the number of times they hugged their dad or said, "I heard I love you," or experienced closeness on one hand. But dad coached the football team every year, or dad was a little bit more, emotionally sensitive and gardened and was emotionally in tune with and really inside the house, but was kind of a little flaccid and not really strong. Didn't feel like he had a backbone, and so it was hard to find safety, especially as you grew into manhood. So I think I love what you said, and just to call that out, because I think for us to become rebuilt men, and we just did a podcast a few weeks ago on what does it mean to be a dangerous man. It's not a weak man. It's not a tyrant. How do you become both? I think we need strong men in our lives who show us what it looks like to be able to hug one another for an extended period of time. And I don't mean 20 minutes, but like 5 seconds without patting your back, which means I'm not okay or I want out. Like the ability to be able to show that kind of physical affection and attunement, and then to tell us to go harder, to give more, that their life reveals the kind of self-sacrifice that all of us want to live. And a man who can possess both and show others both is a special kind of man I've found in my life. And it's made a world of difference for me personally. And then to be that to others has meant a world of difference as well.
Yeah, I've joked about it jokingly, but I mean a lot of truth and vulnerability in it as well. As I was a part of a Saturday morning men's group for a couple of years, from about 2020 to 2023. We meet every Saturday via Zoom, 7 a.m. And a lot of times I'd field that call in the car on the way to the gym because I'd want to get a deadlifting session in after the call. And I would joke with the guys because in that period of my life, I was experiencing emotions really for the first time, as we talked about this colorness of life, the high and the spectrums, feeling the good and the bad. And I was going through a lot of life transitions. And there were countless Saturdays where that call would bring me to tears. And then I would go lift 500 pounds off the ground. And I would voice to these guys, like, I'm going to be the only guy by 9 a.m. this Saturday that has both cried and deadlifted 500 pounds. But I kind of wore it as like a badge of honor. But it was like something that like I've learned to kind of like grow a lot of comfort in my ability to navigate both sides of that. And, speaking to that truth admission there, I think a lot of times for the guy that is caught up in the depths of that first admission of truth is what you had to get to realization with yourself as well. It's like, I'm actually not doing anything to try to overcome this. I say that I'm trying to quit, but nothing is changing. I mean, I've had thousands of conversations with guys over the years that tell me they want to quit or they're trying to quit. And then I say, well, what are you doing? I'm trying to quit. Well, you just told me the same answer to two different questions. Which one is it? Like, what is the trying component? So, it's interesting. There's like that admission of truth there that, hey, I say I've wanted this, but I'm actually not doing the thing that I say I want. And that weight is kind of lifted. Wrapping things up here, I want to obviously highlight what you guys are doing over there at the Freedom Group. you've talked about your background. You've done an incredible job of articulating so much of your depth of knowledge and understanding and some of the things you guys are doing inside the groups, the one-to-one, the year long. If you had to kind of hone it all into maybe the secret sauce, right? You've obviously studied a lot of different things out there. You're very familiar with many people within the work. You guys are succeeding for one reason or another. If you had to kind of formulate what separates the Freedom Group from a lot of the other great organizations, and even the Rebuilt Man specifically here today, like what is that secret sauce that you guys wrap up and help guys ultimately create that craving-free life?
Yeah. The two questions that you find all over the literature, every book that I've ever read on this topic, every study that I've read, et cetera, is speaking to some component of one of these two questions, if not the question in its entirety. The first one is, how do I need to develop emotional regulation tools beyond porn and masturbation in my life? That I have to have equally good tools or new tools that provide over the course of a longer period of time as satisfying an emotional regulation tool as porn or masturbation was for me in a moment, and then brought me back to pain and discomfort. So I have to find better ways to regulate my emotions. That's the first part. The second part is, why has sexuality in particular become the context, or why has it become the issue? Why has it become the outlet, right? That there's something bound up in your story and experience that needs to be paid attention to in order to unlock the key for your specific identity. And our personal belief is that there is an evil one out there, that there is somebody, and we don't over relate to the spiritual in terms of like pray it away, but that there is an evil one who knows you particularly and specifically, and he freaking hates you. And he wants to destroy you where it hurts the most. He doesn't waste energy, right? He is going after you where your identity lies, right? And I love Dan Allender's quote about this when he asks about learning to develop a sense of your purpose in life. Why were you created? He asks the questions: what do you love? What do you hate? And how have you been assaulted? And I love that question, because he said, when you figure out the answer to that question, you can live in such a way that you become aware that the evil one basically has to pay back because of your influence in the world, to the point that your life is better off than if you had never been abused. That's a big statement, especially for somebody like me who experienced as a child, as an innocent child, being acted upon in a way that really abused me in a real significant way. But I've experienced that as I've developed and experienced the way that I was specifically assaulted, that as I learned to experience the redemption of that my life is better off and my work is better off, and the influence and the character and all the things about who I am, that for some reason, in the mystery of creation and suffering and sin and death and resurrection, it is better that I suffered that than have never been given that to carry at all. And it's not just better for me, it's better for my family, it's better for my children, it's better for the community that I serve, and it means the world to me. So that for me has become really the foundation of the context of the story. Is there's something here playing out, and it's this sort of the John Eldridge that I think in the second wave of the masculine movement was unleashed in America, certainly, but all over the world, is that you're part of a bigger story. And the things that are happening to you in the context you find yourself living in matter. And you should pay attention to them, because if you don't, you might miss the role you're supposed to play in a story that's way freaking bigger than you, but can't be lived out in its perfection without you. And that for me, the ending, the launching point of our group is that identity, mission, and purpose is the point of all of this. That finding out who you are and living in those ideals in accordance with who you are without failing that value or identity is the goal. And then living in every moment, in the present moment, showing up exactly who you are in the present moment, not living in the past or out of past patterns of behavior, not living in the future, wishing and hoping to attain some achievement or goal when then you'll finally be fulfilled. No, living exactly here in this moment, sitting here with you, appreciating you for who you are and what's happening here. And I'm so grateful for this moment in time. And and something about my story has brought this to fruition, but ultimately it's his story that I'm participating. It's a freaking blast to be able to participate. And so being able to just be present and attuned and challenged and wanting to go harder and live more and leave it all on the table ultimately is the result. And then there's all the practical stuff, which I won't bore you with, but there's the holistic realities. This isn't just a spiritual issue. It's not just a psychological or neurological issue. It's not a body or a physiological issue. That it's a whole person issue. That this thing that we're reeling with, I think 80% of men in our church are reeling with in the world that we live in today, that reality is attacking something that, if we get free from, will change the very fabric of your life. And you and I have experienced that. The fabric of your being will shift something. And again, I think as we start to experience a mass of men get free, that clarion call of this side of the fence is pretty freaking good. And it's not worth going back. And you should come with us. It's going to get louder and louder and louder. And I think the gates of hell ought to be awful afraid of that day coming, because I think it's coming soon. And I appreciate you, Frank, for leading that charge in many ways, of stepping into what I believe is the fourth wave of the masculine movement, inviting guys into attunement and into challenge, to go hard, to be vulnerable enough to cry and to experience and to ride the wave of emotion, not so that we can become kumbaya, sit around the fire and just feel all day. Because I think that's a fear that high performers have. Well, if I start to allow myself to feel, I'll be less productive. No, actually cramming down your emotions and outletting them in an intensely negative thing is the thing much more likely to destroy you than learning to be able to process them in such a way that they flow through you and out of you, so that you can continue to show up in a high performing way in every domain of your life, rather than being super effective in work and having your relationship or marriage and family life be in shambles. It's about the integration of all of it. So again, it's the body, mind, and spirit approach, really couched into the context of answering those two questions. And if you can answer those not just on an intellectual level, but on an experiential level, that's the goal. And that's when real freedom is felt and experienced.
So well said and beautifully articulated, man. I think that's a great place to wrap this conversation up. Before we do end it, man, I just want to, extend a word of appreciation, acknowledgement, and gratitude, both for myself, but all the men that will get value out of this conversation, both inside the Rebuilt Man community, but also our listenership all across the world. The work that you're doing, Joe, is meaningful. It's highly important, highly effective, and it's having a lasting impact, not just on the men that you serve, but obviously the legacies that they're going to leave. We have a colleague, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Satya Sam, but his quote is, "Change the man, change the world." And I think that message trickles through our entire space. And I'm so honored to have connected with you years ago when you're first getting started, and watch from the sidelines the work and the impact that your team is having. So from myself, from the team here at Rebuilt Man, and our entire community, thank you for what you guys are doing. And, we are looking forward to seeing you continue to lead a massive movement over there, and anything we can do to support you, what you guys are doing, we're all on board for it. So in wrapping it up, 60 seconds here, thousands of guys will hear this conversation as we bring it home to a close. What's the one thing that you want to share with them if they're still caught up in the struggling?
Yeah. I mean, it's hope. You can be free. You can do it. If I can do it after 23 years, you can. And we're in this. I mean, this means the world to me too, Frank. We're in this till every man's free. And so I say to you that's listening, that's still stuck, you're going to get there. You are going to get there, and you can have it. The resistance, the avoidance, all that you experience is pales in comparison to the joy and gift it is to live as a rebuilt man, as a free man, as an integrated man. And the world, your sphere of influence desperately needs you to step into your impact and to stop avoiding, to pick up your damn cross, to pick up your suffering, to choose your suffering, and to experience the resurrection that new life and freedom provides, and to live in it, and to never stop living it until the day that you die. And then you'll be marvel about the ways that God will invite you to turn around and hand it away, like certainly you and I are. So that's my message.
Amen. Guys, Joe Masek, the Freedom Group, will have his links, his socials, his podcast, links to his coaching group, all plugged down there in the show notes. Check him out, give him a follow, reach out, drop him a message, tune into his podcast, the Manual Podcast, with him and his co-host and co-founder over there. But Joe, it's been an absolute honor, man. I appreciate you once again for all the work and for sharing so much wisdom and value with us and our audience today. So, guys, make sure to connect with Joe out there, rate, review, subscribe. And most importantly, if there's a guy in your life that is caught up in the depths right now and is still struggling, and today's conversation can assist him in finding the right steps towards freedom, do us a favor and him the blessing by sharing this conversation episode with him. But for Joe Masek, your host, Coach Frank, we love you guys. We'll see you in the next one.